Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Cup of Hope with Hope Against Trafficking and the Michigan Abolitionist Project. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. You're listening at your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to our panel by typing your questions in the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them at the end of the session. Please welcome today's panelists. We have Tracy Kavelligan, who is the Executive Director of Hope Against Trafficking, Hannah McPeak, the Education Director of Hope Against Trafficking, and you can't see her on the screen, but she's on the phone, Emily Johnson, Program Coordinator at Michigan Abolitionist Project. Thank you for joining.
Hi, what are you doing this week?
Oh, pretty good. We had spring break last week, and now this week we're kicking back off to school with the kids. It's a little chaotic, but it's good. We're halfway through the week.
Yeah, maybe they could build a snowman by the end of the day.
Oh my God. I think
Wow.
Michigan is just as confused as we all are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. I feel like we're in the twilight zone, just with life
Right.
right now.
Keeps you on your toes, you know?
Yeah. So now we're in our second part of our 3-part series about pornography. And last week, if you missed last week, we have the recording set up on the Hope Against Trafficking's website in the Hope Happening tab. So hopefully, if you haven't seen it, you can look at what we talked about last week. And next week, we're going to be talking about how to talk to your children about porn. And hopefully we'll have a guest panelist, for next week. So, and then this week, we're going to talk about pornography with how it's how it affects your brain, your heart, and then globally. So, wait a minute, did we lose Emily? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to. I'm called in, so I'll be with you here audibly. But my Wi-Fi connection in my house is all sorts of whack today, so bear with me. I'll probably be in and out.
That just adds to the chaos of our lives right now.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure people at home are experiencing some technical difficulties too. I feel like Wi-Fi connections in homes in general is just a whole thing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we get started on how porn affects the brain. I mean, that's I don't think a lot of people understand that. What do you think?
So I've gained a lot of knowledge. There's a resource, a website, and an organization called Fight the New Drug, and they are just phenomenal in providing just so much information. And that's their whole get is just they're a non-religious, non-political group, nonprofit, and they focus solely on research and personal accounts. And they just want people to be aware. They want to put the information out there, the research in front of you, so that you can make informed decisions about pornography consumption. They just want their audience to consider before consuming, and they have just a plethora. They have documentary, a 3-part documentary series. They've got a plethora of articles. They've got videos, again, personal accounts, and they're just super research-based, and you just can't help but just dive into it. But and they do say that they are not anti-porn. They just want you to consider the harmful effects that it can have, and they are most definitely pro-love. They are pro-sex, but pro-love. And so they just want to let you know that porn can be anti-love sometimes. So when we're talking about how porn affects the brain, just as an individual, I think we mentioned this a bit last week too, is just how pornography is kind of becoming this tool of education for a lot of our youth today. And and that can be a very scary thing. And either like they're looking for it, or their friends are telling them about it, or it's just popping up on their computers. And a lot of these porn sites, you don't have to verify your age. It's free, and you have this whole world of it's this whole world is opened up to you, and you can just explore and be exposed to some really wild stuff. So,
well, do you know what happened to me yesterday? I was going on a conference call, and the person sent me and the other person the phone number to connect to, and it was one number off that they gave us, and it was a sex line. So
wow.
Exact same number except for one off. So I had it was a 2 instead of a 1, but she accidentally put 1. So when we called the 1-800 number, I mean, we were on a business call, and we all called into a talk, a porn talk line, and they were like, saying stuff, and we're just like, oh my goodness. So we all came off, and then online we're like, wait a minute, where was that? And it was just one number off. Like they are looking at business phone numbers, and they're trying to get phone numbers as close as possible so that people, when they make mistakes, I mean, so you could have I mean, it can happen anywhere, not just online, just like with the business call. That was crazy.
Right.
Yeah. It's so easy for that to happen. And like when you brought up, Emily, that young people are like sort of sometimes looking at pornography as like sex ed, which is to me terrifying. But here's the other thing, like when you talk about pornography, the impact on the brain, I know that kids, their brain wiring is like twice as much. And so think about like their like the liking wiring and the connections that are happening in the brain are happening like much faster for those who are younger. And so the impact on a younger brain is, I think they say about in the research, about twice that of the impact and the change, than someone who as an adult. And so that's even more of something to note, to pay attention to, because there truly is significant impact that pornography does have on the brain. And, and it's connected with, when you look at the movement and the activity and the changes in the brain with addiction, which is why it's very fitting that this group, this research entity is called the Fight the New Drug, because it very much parallels the impact that an actual addiction to a substance that you ingest has.
Right.
Because really, it isn't even it's not necessary to have that actual like ingestion of a substance, but because what that substance does is the same thing that your visual intake can do. And that's impacting the wiring and the pleasure sensors of your brain. And there's a release of dopamine and delta phosphate and things like that impact your connecting the experience with the pleasure and all those things. I don't want to get into all of the neuro clinical, but that really, there truly is that physiological, neurological impact.
Right. And then you need more and more and more to get the pleasure that, to reach climax, if you will. It's like more and more and more to get it. Soon it's not just looking at a picture, it's watching a movie, and then it turns into, acting it out, and it leads to so much more, eventually, just like it does with drugs.
Well, and the reason that happens is your brain then, after it releases that dopamine, you have that experience, what happens is your brain releases what's called CREB, and it's a long name, so most people just call it CREB, CREB. And what that does is it stops the release of that pleasure neurotransmitter, because it's trying to keep you safe. Your brain is bounds, right? Am I saying that right, Emily?
And it's all, that sounds about. What do you what are you asking for clarification on?
Oh, you're cutting out a little bit. But I know that that substance, the Krebs, is stops it, and so the same amount of release needs to be offset, and so you need to increase the experience in order to increase the pleasure. So whether
Right.
that be doing it live or whether that be looking for more egregious content, whether you need to have
Right.
something more violent or whatever, that need is very strong, and it will happen. Like, you can't avoid that reality when you are consuming pornography.
Right, and just like mentioning, it's an escalating behavior. So then when you're watching these things, and then you go to your partner, if you have a partner, and your expectations of what your partner can provide, or even your own performance. So you'll seek out these experiences with your partner, or and then you become disappointed and dissatisfied in relationships oftentimes, because you'll realize that is not a typical sexual experience, and that the average girl does not like being treated that way, degraded and humiliated, or yeah. So this addictive, just to recap what you're saying, yeah, just like the releasing of the dopamine in the brain, and it becoming addictive, almost affecting us in the same way that drugs can affect us.
Well, it affects your life, it affects your job. I mean, like, if you become addicted, all you do is sit in front of a computer screen, it can take your money, because you're paying to go, you're paying for these sites, or you're paying to talk on the phone to people who will talk to you. That turns you on. I mean, it affects your bank account, it affects your job, it affects your relationships. And you have to look at a 12-step program or some kind of program, to your behavior. It's a withdrawal. You'll go through withdrawal. It affects your brain just like a drug. And you will have to, most people can't just cut, just do cold turkey. They need help, some kind of program.
And there is, those programs do exist. And what's amazing, kind of a cup of hope here in that is, we know that people have gone through programs and have really worked to change their behavior with regard to the addiction, and maintain sobriety. Just like that, our brains are very powerful. I mean, it's unbelievable what our brains are capable of, and that we can completely rewire. We can reshape and reconstruct wiring that's happening, so that you can enjoy the things in life that are supposed to be true to that, versus stop sort of consuming pornography or consuming things that are really leading to things that cause a lot of issues in your life. People gain that joy and regain, their hearts. Because, the other piece that I think, Tracy, you were kind of bringing this part up, is that it really does affect that yourself, your own, your heart, yourself, right? The way that you feel about who you are, there's an increased level of depression. So when the Krebs kicks in and when it decreases your dopamine levels, your body, depression sets in, self-loathing sets in, discomfort, no sense of peace. You're irritable. You can't. It's hard for you to enjoy the other things in life that you were meant to enjoy. People in life, the relationships are then affected. So it's powerful.
Right. Because when it
your heart and your relationships, right, Emily? Or is there?
Right, because when it affects when it's releasing dopamine, a lot of people use things like that to cope. Like, a lot of people use drugs to cope with situations. So a lot of people will use pornography to cope with certain situations. And just bring it back to relationships. If your significant other, or if it's hard to even find a significant other because they don't appeal to these tastes that you developed, then you just continue to turn back to the porn. And then you do start to feel depressed and lonely because you can't connect with people anymore because you have such a connection with the screen. And and this fantasized relationship that you've created by yourself and with the screen. So I think we should get into just to talk about relationships a bit, like, when you're getting to know somebody and dating, a typical, you'll start kissing and just the way that things naturally flow. Or like if you're in a relationship, telling that person that you love them, and and a lot of that stuff is not depicted in pornography. So if this is being used as a tool for young boys and even young girls, their whole view of healthy and exciting romance and that love is just totally warped, and they definitely don't show people being sweet with one another. So your whole expectation of, just especially for young people, and it's this having their first relationship or experience, their whole expectations gets really skewed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And even just like how that translates to behavior, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the way that you treat somebody, I mean, it isn't just like relating, but like, and having that fun relationship, but just how you treat just somebody next to you.
Right. Right.
How you interpret, what's healthy and not healthy, and just your behavior can affect those. You're like, why am I having such a hard time finding somebody? Or you wonder, and it just all continues to, like, it's like you're in this cycle that just is so hard to break.
Well, true. And also, if you do have a significant other, it's really about, you're cheating on your significant other. You're looking at other people. You're getting pleasure, or you're seeking somewhere else to get something that you should be getting from your relationship. So a lot of us, I myself, deem that as cheating. If my spouse is looking at pornography, that's another woman. That's another person that they're looking at. And if so, now if I would feel my self-esteem is going to be affected, and am I not enough, and do I need to do this in order to make this person happy? Now you're affecting another person who is not who's not looking at porn, but they're being affected by porn through this other person. And in addition to that, what about if you have it on your screen, or you walk away, or your children walk in? And that goes back to our discussion of, how early should a child, see something like that, and how that affects them. I mean, that's a whole new, when your child walks in on it, and now you have to explain why this is on the screen, and that could affect that child depending on where they are in their developmental stage. How is this? Do I need to do this when I'm big and I'm married? Is this normal? Is this what we need to do? I mean, because as parents, we're laying out what's supposed to be normal or functional for family life. And this will family life for generations.
Yeah, I think just pulling a quote from Fight the New Drug directly, they say, after being exposed to pornography, men reported being less satisfied with their partner's physical appearance. We know that, a lot of porn, women's body parts are accentuated, or, but men were less satisfied with partner's physical appearance, sexual performance, and level of affection, and express greater desire for sex without emotional involvement. I think that there's just a warped idea of how women, I mean, these people are actors, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes what you're viewing is non-consensual sex, and but first and foremost, these people are actors, and this whole thing is an act. And so men are thinking like, oh wow, that woman's really enjoying that, when really you don't know if she's enjoying that. And then you have young girls thinking like, oh, I'm supposed to enjoy that. That doesn't look fun. That looks really painful. Or so, and then just to touch real quick, like there's a whole just lack of consent in pornography. And if young boys and girls are watching it, you know, that really, this whole issue of consenting and knowing when someone is consenting and asking for consent. You know, pornography teaches the opposite, that it's more so like, oh, it's more so demonstrated in pornography, the lack of consent, and that's what people are into. And so that's teaching all kinds of unhealthy habits. But we've got about 6 minutes, so I don't know if one of you want to kick it off with how this ties into sex trafficking, how pornography and sex trafficking are linked in more ways than not.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, when you think about pornography, I mean, and I had alluded to this sort of in our earlier conversation about regarding relationships and how you treat people and how you behave. That one way is like that it increases or perpetuates domestic violence, it perpetuates degradation of human life, it perpetuates abuse. And so when you think about those things, when you think about trafficking, you know, some of these women, like for example, you think of fraud, force, and coercion. We think of human trafficking, and that's specifically to talk about sex trafficking because we're talking about pornography. Okay, so when we talk about sex trafficking, if you are this is when somebody is induced to perform a sex act or commercial sex act through force, fraud, or coercion. But it doesn't require force, fraud, or coercion if you are below the age of 18, if you've not reached the age of 18. So that's something that I need to make sure that is clear, so we have an understanding. This is how the trafficking in persons defines human trafficking. Okay, it's put out by the State Department. So when you look at that definition, you look at fraud, force, coercion. Coercion is the key word here, because coercion is like, let me give you an example. So let's say I show up for a filming of a specific pornography set that I'm expecting to happen one way, right? And I go in there, and all of a sudden, it's a lot more aggressive than I was told by my agent. And now I'm saying, well, I don't really want to do that. That wasn't what I thought was the expectation. Well, the agent and the producer are going to be like, well, then you owe me money because we spent time setting this up, and your agent, you know, and then your agent's like, well, you owe me, and then I'm going to cancel all your next bookings or whatever. You're not going to follow.
She's penalized for it.
Now you owe all this money, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, I have to pay rent, and I have, let's say I'm a single
parent. Need this job.
You know what I mean? Like, supposedly my job. I'm still getting a paycheck, but now I'm kind of coerced into this sex act that I was not expecting, and fraudulent a little bit, because it gave me one impression. The reality of it was something different, and now I'm not necessarily consenting, but I kind of am, but I'm not. But I mean, I'm kind of forced into this situation now because I didn't realize of the impact that this decision was going to be, because they told me one thing and it ended up being something different.
Right. And so let's say she does go through with that, and filming, I mean, this is a film, so the director needs to make sure he has all his shots and, you know, everything looks good. So she may be doing that for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours until he gets the shot that he wants. And let's say that it is very painful, or that it is, you know, the things that a lot of the people in the porn industry endure behind the scenes is really something that people need to consider when they're watching and consuming pornography.
It is not a victimless activity.
Absolutely.
And that's I mean, if you were to take the time to interview, you know, in fact, I've received a call from somebody who was in the porn industry who was really struggling, and it was really because they were trying to understand, like, what's happening to me, like, how, you know, I don't understand what's going on. And we switched having these conversations about what human trafficking was and what, what it is and what that means for somebody who's in that industry, because it's very real. I mean, people are reaching for help too. I mean, it truly is, there are victims, and there's a lot of abuse that's happening in the industry.
Well, those are right. And those are good points, because there's two issues also. One is we don't know how old the girls are, because they could be under 18 and, and they want money. They're runaways or vulnerable. And secondly, some of the abuse that occurs in the pornography is that a lot of times the director wants to taste the goods first, so to speak. One is know what you're doing, and one is make sure you're going to do it right. And so now the woman feels like they have to, and men too, don't get me wrong, there's men who said the same thing, that now they have to do certain things to basically audition for the role. Also, two things happen, and it's been reported that they don't even, some of them don't even get the courtesy of being told it's different. The other actor knows what to do, and you think it's going to be one thing, and then all of a sudden it becomes a rape scene, or it comes something like that, and it's because it's creative. They want they want it to be as real as possible, and so tell the person so they can get her actual reaction. So there's so many different things that occur that we as a consumer, you cannot, just like we talked about last week, as a consumer, can you make absolute statement that yes, this product is been completed by all consensual adults, and that it's acted, ethically and morally, or whatever it is. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be consuming it.
Right. And there's petitions and legislation out right now that kind of addresses that too. There's the Earn It Act specifically that's kind of discussing that whole thing and how to hold these companies responsible for encouraging the victimhood. But I do also just want to tie in real quick, like when consumers are watching pornography and are finding dissatisfaction in their relationships, then it is more likely for them to buy sex. And a lot of the ideas that they want when they buy sex have been formulated in their brain from the things that they've watched. So a lot of the times they'll go to these women wanting to buy sex, go to a sex worker, and show them the video, say, this is what I want, this is what I've seen, and this is what I want. And so there's so many counts of sex workers or survivors of human trafficking that have just explained the level of violence. Being a sex worker is one of the most dangerous professions in today's world, and it's because of these violent things that porn encourages, and that people don't find a relationship, so they have to, they feel like buying sex is the only way that they can fulfill their fantasy, and it's
which goes into
super dangerous for women,
and that furthers demand. And so now the demand increases because you've got your online porn, you've got your magazine porn, your telephone porn, and you don't know if that's real actors or not. It could be revenge porn. It could be, trafficked and trafficked girls and boys in a house that are forced to do that. And so now demands increase. So now people have to go out there to the vulnerable people and try to grab them in to come in to meet the demand. So it's a vicious circle. And people who consume pornography need to understand all of the effects on their lives, on the lives that they connect with, as well as the people that are involved in the making of this porn. It affects everybody, and it's almost chicken and the egg. So what do you do? I mean, it's like, what do you get rid of? And so you've got your industry saying, hey, we got buyers, so we're going to produce. And then you've got your buyers who are addicted most of the time saying, well, I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. So where do we come in and try to break that connection between the demand and, the consumer and the producer? And that's where, this awareness, what we're doing today, and, education, and making sure that we have these conversations with our children, which next week, that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about. And making sure all the resources Emily has shared, that you read, you share them with your family and
Like the
friends.
website. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Check out Fight the New Drug. Kendra, I don't know if you wanted to, if there were any questions or if we should just wrap up.
Nope, no questions yet. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to enter them into the control panel at any time. If we don't get to your question, we will go ahead and we can email you or answer them again next week in our next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. I also always, want to say, make sure that you share a cup of hope with somebody today.
Yes, and thank you for tuning in. Join us next week. As we talk to help you figure out how to have these conversations with kids, and just in terms of hope that our brains can be rewired, and that if this is something that you are currently struggling with, do not feel shame. This is something that many people don't even realize it is a struggle. So we just encourage you to review the research and really consider before consuming, and share these tools and resources with your circle.
So thank you, ladies, and thank you everyone for attending today's Cup of Hope panel. We appreciate your time and hope you found it valuable. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You're also going to receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with links to view a recording of today's webinar and the videos that they spoke about today from Fight the New Drug. I went ahead and a couple people had asked for the website, so I went ahead and did post that in the questions panel. It is fightthenewdrug.org. And on behalf of Hope Against Trafficking and the Michigan Abolitionist Project, thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope that you can tune in again next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Kendra.
Bye. Stay safe.
Nice job, ladies.
Great job. Great conversation.
Are we off?
Yeah.
I don't know. Usually closes, right?
Yeah.
Here it goes.